Good afternoon everybody, and welcome to Stamp and Chat Live, which I'm very happy to be bringing you again this Friday, as I try to do every Friday. But last week it didn't happen, so if you tuned in last week and didn't see that I'd had to cancel it, my apologies. But hopefully you realised in the end. As you may know, we've been having a lot of work done in the house, and it's been going on fine. It's been fairly quiet. It hasn't really been disturbing me too much in the sense of noise, although lovely though the people have been, it's very disruptive in terms of trying to concentrate. But I did think that my live would be absolutely fine. However, what actually ended up happening last Friday was that I had somebody hammering carpet strips into the floor, and I also had our son's dog, who I look after every day while he's at work, shut in here with me to A, keep her away from the sharp things that were being hammered into the floor, and B, keep her away from the white gloss paint, although we had a partial fail on that because she does have a little patch of white gloss paint on her tail. But anyway, I was doing my best, but she was not happy. She was protesting very vocally, and if you know dogs, you'll know how much noise they can make and how determined they can be, and she was not going to shut up for anything. I tried every trick I've got, but no, and it was apparent that it was just going to be impossible to try and run any kind of live session. So I'm so sorry I had to cancel it, but the good news is I'm here today. I'm just going to cough. Excuse me. I'm here today and I'm going to do what I would have done last week, so you haven't actually missed anything. I'm just going to check on my iPad and see if I am live. I'm hoping I am. Let's see. Let's just turn the volume down as well. There we go. And there I am. Hooray. So Mary is here. She says hello to everyone. Hello Mary, nice to have you. Thank you for joining us. Let me just try and get this standing up so it's not falling all over the desk. Right, there we go. All right, so I'm going to be having a lot of inky fun with you today, but first of all, let me see if I can get my head in a little bit better. I think that's better. I think so. So yeah, just a bit of chat first, because I know sometimes it takes people a few minutes just to catch up. The first thing, of course, on a much more serious note, is that the whole of the country, I think, is in shock following the death of Her Majesty the Queen yesterday. I did wonder about carrying on with this, but then I did think, after all, that she was a great one for carrying on, and so I decided that I would carry on as normal, at least for the moment. The day of the funeral will be a different matter, but anyway, so I am here, I am carrying on as normal. What else? Well, we've had a lot of rain. I don't know if you've had rain where you are, but certainly here down in the New Forest we've had a lot of rain. It's rained pretty much every day for the last, at least a week, which is great because the lawn is finally beginning to go green. We have still got quite a lot of dead patches on it, but almost every day I can see a difference. So that's really good. And the garden is perking up. We didn't have the display we normally have over the summer, despite the fact that my husband was out with the watering can. But the dahlias in particular are looking really nice now. We thought we'd lost them, but they've come back, so that rainwater is amazing. So I've apologised for last week not being here because of the workmen, and I need to apologise that I will not be here next week, which is the 16th of September, so I won't be here live next Friday. I'm taking a week's break. However, I will be back the following Friday, all being well, which is the 23rd of September. And what was I going to, I was just going to say something about that and it's completely flown out of my head. Do you ever get that? It was there, that thought was right there, and I opened my mouth and it was gone. Oh yes, I know what I was going to say. What I was going to say was we are having more work done. We got the workmen coming back. It should be fine for me to run that session and also the one the following week. But if I do need to cancel it at the last minute, I will put a post up here on Facebook with my apologies. But fingers crossed, we should be fine for them. And what I will be doing is multicoloured stamping. I've put an event on my Facebook page already about it. I'll be looking at how you can get an image when you stamp that has more than one colour on it. And what do I need to remind you about? Well, through the whole of September we have weekly deals, so every Thursday those deals change. There has been a bit of an issue with the technology around this. They are putting up the new ones each Thursday, but they're struggling to take down from the weekly deals page the ones that are over. So I think what is happening is they are still appearing on the page but without a reduced price on them, which is correct because the items are still available but not at the reduced price. But if it seems a bit confusing, that is why. It seems the technology does not want to play nicely. I believe part of the system was entirely down yesterday when they were trying to add the new things, so we have to bear with them. As we all know, I'm sure, technology is a wonderful thing when it's working, but when it isn't, it creates all kinds of mayhem, and sometimes it creates mayhem even when we weren't anticipating it. However, this week's deals, you can find them on my Facebook, no, not on my Facebook, well, you can find them on my Facebook page. I will be putting a post there, but mainly on my website. In a minute when I put the camera down, you'll be able to see my website. It's sallybowman.stampinup.net, and if you click the shop tab and then if you click specials, then you will see the weekly deals there. But the ones that caught my eye this week are the rose gold sheets, which are beautiful, the slimline envelopes, which you've probably seen me use here quite a few times, the soft pastels, which I used a couple of 3 weeks ago. I really like those. And if you're starting to think about your Christmas crafting, you can get the white velvet sheets, which feel beautiful, and the real red ruffled ribbon, which takes a little bit of saying but is really pretty. Those are all in this week's deals, so you can shop online and get all of those at reduced prices. The amount of the reduction varies depending on the item, but they're all there. And if you use the current host code on an order of over £35 worth of goodies, then I will send you a little something in the post next month. And when I turn the camera down, I've got the host code written out for you, so rather than me read it out, I have that for you. I'm also going to show you the snowfall, I've called it, the snowfall sampler, which, if you're again thinking ahead to Christmas projects, is a really good thing to order now. You'll get it in October and it will be there waiting for you when you're ready to start creating any of your Christmas projects which have a snowflake theme. So I'll show you what's in that in just a minute. But for now, I'm going to put the camera down onto my desk. I'm just going to cover you over, so hopefully I can get everything moved and straight without you feeling seasick. So bear with me while I do that. Pop a little bit of washi tape over my camera lens. Turn everything down. Let me mirror image. So hopefully I'm not upside down. And things should be the right way round. Let's just move this camera. I always have to tweak it a little bit once I can see things in the same way that you can see them. But I try and get most of it done before I take the cover off the lens. I've got lots of wires here. Let's do something about those. Okay, I'm wearing my apron because I will be, as I said, having a little bit of inky fun, and whilst this isn't super messy, I didn't want to get covered in ink, so I thought, well, if I put my apron on it won't matter, and I'd rather be careful than think afterwards, I wish I'd put that apron on. Alright, let's just try and hook up that wire there out of your way. And I suspect, I don't think I can get that to stay any better. All right, so for online shopping, that's my website. If you need to get hold of me, that's my email. And if you're placing an online order, do use the host code there. There's a little box at checkout, just enter that code. And then if your order is over £35, next month I will send you a little something in the post to say thank you. All right, so I'm going to pull out all the bits for the snowfall sampler. Now, because these are largely white, some of them don't show up as well as I would like on camera, but I do my best. if you need those back, you can just ask. All right, so what have we got? We've got gorgeous ribbon. So this is the metallic mesh ribbon. You've got a quarter of a reel of that, which is 2.5 meters, give or take. Some of the iridescent trim. This has got like a knitted center and sort of tinsel coming off it. It's really nice. It's very soft. You can tie it in bows. You can loop it round, you can use it as trim, as scarves around penguins, all sorts of things. So you also get a quarter of a reel of that. So again, that's about 2.25 meters. You'll get a sheet of these die cut snowflakes. In the catalogue, they're called Wonderful Snowflakes. Let me just pop them on a piece of coloured card so you can see them a little bit better. So these are around about, let me measure those. I know I measured this last time, but I haven't written down what they measure. So they are about 2 3/4 inches across. They're die cut in this beautiful iridescent paper. So you get 6 of those. You get a quarter of a pack of the snowflake vellum. So this is 6 different pieces. Each one is 6 by 6 inches. So you have iridescent foil snowflakes in 2 different designs. And some of these you could actually cut out with scissors if you wanted to. And then you also get a dotty one. This looks like snowflakes, but actually it could work for almost anything. It would be great for birthday cards too. And then the other 3 pieces all have a velvet finish on them. So again, we have the same designs, 2 different snowflake designs, and these are on, it's a vellum, but it's almost got like a pearlescent background with these, and then the snowflake one. So that's a quarter of a pack of the snowflake vellum, a quarter of a pack of the snowy white velvet sheets. So this piece will be 12 inches by 6 inches. It die cuts beautifully, or you can obviously cut it with your trimmer. You'll get 3 of the Stars treat bags. So these are lovely for treats. You can also put a piece of, what's the best way to show you, coloured card or foil inside. Let me just slide that bright pink post-it note in. There we are. You can hopefully see those stars now. To show those off, you can ink these or stamp on them, and you can also put little battery tea lights in them to use them as luminaires, those little paper lanterns. And they are really made of card. I wouldn't call that paper really. They're very, very thick and sturdy. So those are beautiful. 3 of those. And then some card as well. So I've given you a piece of starry sky, a piece of a balmy blue, a piece of pool party, and then 2 sheets of basic white and 2 sheets of thick basic white, which is perfect for card bases. So that's 7 sheets of card, as well as all your extra pieces. So what I've done is I've worked out how much the cost of these is. So I've divvied up the cost of the individual packs in the catalogue, added that together, then I've rounded it up to the nearest pound, which comes to £14. If you can collect from me, then this sampler will cost you £14. If you'd like me to post it to you, I can absolutely do that, and that will cost you £16.50, which is just the cost of a board back to envelope and 2nd class postage. And you have until the 23rd of September to order these. And then I will send them out to you if I'm posting them, or have them ready for you to collect by the 21st of October. So if you'd like one of those, all you have to do is email me. But right now it is time to actually get on and have some fun. So I've got all sorts of bits of kit here, but nothing very technical. So let me get it all out and then I'll talk you through what I've got. All right, So I've already said I've got my apron on. It's slightly messy, but not dreadfully messy, this technique. So I do have some bits of kitchen paper here for mopping up, because we've been using water and ink, so sometimes it doesn't always go where you want it to go. I've got more here than I shall need, but it's easier to have too much than have to leave you all and go and find some more. I've also got some scrap paper, which I'm actually going to lay on top of my grid paper. I love my grid paper for working on, and it is pretty absorbent. However, and forgive me for just tilting this a little bit, to save me having to keep changing out the grid paper, I've actually got some absorbent, very old paper here. This is foolscap, that's how old this is. You might have seen me use this before. My in-laws gave me a couple of packs of this. It's very poor quality paper, but that means it's really absorbent, so it's quite nice for putting underneath for inky techniques. I have a silicone craft sheet, and I've got a piece of paper with all these bits on it, which I'll show you in just a moment. I've got a couple of water painters. I'll probably be using this one, which is the round brush, but it's the larger of the two round brushes, and a spritzer with tap water in it. So this is just a little spray bottle. You unscrew it, you can fill it under the tap, and I've just got plain tap water in here. There we go, I've made a mess already, look at that. Let's just dry that up. I've actually got quite a few of these, so I haven't got to keep running to the tap and refilling them, but you don't actually need loads. And I'm going to turn that over just to remind me to use it with the non-logo side. There is a raised logo on one side, but so I can use the whole of it with an even surface on it. I'm just going to turn it over so the logo's at the bottom. I've got some ink pads, which I will pull out in a minute, and then I've got two kinds of card here. This is shimmery white card. The camera doesn't usually pick up the shimmer very well. If you've got it in front of you, you can see it does have a shimmer. It's a slightly off-white card, and this will take really wet media very well. Don't try and do this with standard coloured card or standard white or vanilla card, because the fibres in the card just simply come apart, the surface degrades, and it's horrible. So don't try and do it with ordinary card. However, our shimmery white and then the other one I've got, which is watercolour paper, these are both absolutely brilliant for this. The watercolour paper is my favourite. I love the texture of it. It's very soft. It has a slightly textured surface, but not enough that means you can't stamp on it. It's very heavyweight, and this will take as much water as you want to throw at it, so that really is my favourite. And there we go. I knew I'd got that somewhere. That is a list of all those things and where you can find them in the catalogue. So they're all in the annual catalogue AC. I've put the pages there. I've told you how much they are, and pretty much all of this is very economical. The spritzers, I think these are the bargain of the catalogue. You get a pack of 2 for £3.25. I mean, that is almost nothing, and these are lovely spritzers. I've got some from another brand, and they're only about this big, and they were quite a lot more money than that. They work fine, but these are better because they don't need refilling so often. So that's all those things. And then I've also got a handful of old book pages. You may or may not know that I do a lot of art journaling and mixed media work, so I really like to use these as part of that. I collage them on, and I'm going to be using those to mop up some of my surplus ink today to provide me with some collage fodder. If you are one of those people, like I used to be, who looks at pages torn out of books with absolute horror, then I always think of them as giving the books a new life. You can see how old these are. You know, lots of this paper is really brown. And these books were all destined for landfill. So if I rescue them and then I tear the pages out and use them, I think of them as having a new life, so I don't feel guilty about using them. So you might find car boot sales are a good source of these. My local community centre always has books for sale, and often the really old ones in poor condition are ever so cheap. Often they've got the covers falling off and bits of pages missing and all the rest of it, so I rescue those. So I've got some old book pages and more on those in a minute. If you need this sheet back, let me know. So for this technique, my biggest take home for you is to enjoy the unpredictability and the surprises. You've just got to embrace that. You can plan to a certain extent, but you cannot exactly gauge what's going to happen. If you end up with pieces of card that you don't love as whole pieces, you can always die cut them into smaller pieces, and I've got some of those done in a minute, which I will show you. And you're going to end up with a very layered mixed media look to what you produce. Pretty much any colour and most images are going to work with this, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute, but let's get going, shall we? So let me pull out one or two other things. So the first thing I have here are some ink pads. Now the three I'm using are Mango Melody, Orchid Oasis and Tahitian Tide. If you like colours, if you like deciding on colours, then you can pick some from the same Stampin' Up family. Those will all go beautifully together. If you've got an artistic background and you've got a colour wheel hanging around at home, these are kind of opposite on the colour wheel, so they work really nicely together. And these two are pretty close to each other on the colour wheel, which means they tone together nicely. But it doesn't matter which colours you pick. Pick colours you love. That's the most important thing. So I've got three colours. You can use just a couple. You could even use one and you'd still get a nice effect. Then I've got some stamps. I have two stamp sets I'm using here. One is Quiet Meadow, and I'm using this splatter here and this distressed typeface, so I've got those ready on some blocks. And then I'm also using this stamp set, which actually came with one of the card kits, the Sentimental Rose kit. I've dug this out recently. It's such a nice set. I'm going to be using this open flower because I wanted an open shape to start with. So this does have some shading on it, but it's also got some more open areas, so that's going to work really well. I could have used either of these floral images here. Actually, even these tiny ones would work. So just pick something that's not a complete silhouette stamp, not a totally solid stamp, and that will be fine. So I've got that stamp here as well. And because that's a photopolymer stamp, I have a foam mat just to rest on. And have I got anything else to dig out? No, I haven't. All right, so what I'm going to be doing is getting layers of ink onto my card. I'll do a watercolour paper piece and I'll do a shimmery white piece so you can see the difference. And the differences are not great. I've also got a heat tool here because I've only got an hour with you and I haven't even got anything like an hour left now because I've been busy talking. So I want to dry my layers in between and then I can get on and show you the next stage. But you can leave these to air dry. And in fact, if it's warm outside, you'll find that they do dry fairly quickly. The first thing I'm going to do is open up my ink pad and I'm going to apply some ink straight to my silicone craft sheet. And I'm just going to press the ink pad on there, and I usually start with one colour in the middle. So let's start with Mango Melody, and I'm just laying it down and pressing it. So hopefully you can see that I've got a rectangle of ink there, and then I'm just going to add these around it. I'm going to try not to overlap them just so I don't contaminate my ink pad, but if I do get some orange on here, I'll just dab that orange off with a piece of kitchen paper. So let's put some of these side by side. It doesn't matter how you arrange these. You can see that you definitely need some paper down. Let's put some more orange there. There we are. Right, I'll close those up. So now I've got a good amount of ink on my craft sheet and the fun can begin. So the first thing I'm going to do is to spritz this with water and then do some stamping. So let me just put this to one side, and then I've got space for my card here. So make sure I know where the nozzle is, and then I'm just going to spritz this. People always say to me how much water, and it's really a case of practice, but I think that was about 12 spritzes. I might just add 4, 5, there we go, that's about 5 more, and if I can lift this up, I don't think it's going to run absolutely everywhere. You can, so we go, you can see that ink has really beaded up, and if I tilt that, it's just starting to run a little bit, but I haven't got so much that all these separate colours of ink have run into each other. They will run into each other shortly, but not yet. And I don't know if you can actually see, but off to one side where some of the water has hit the ink and then bounced off, I've actually got quite a lot of ink spatter on my desk, which is what I meant about this is a little bit messy. So I'm going to start off with watercolour paper because this is my favourite, and I'm just going to stamp. So I need my foam mat, so let's just tuck that under there so it doesn't get inky. So I'm just going to tap this in the ink as if it was an ink pad, and at this point I can mix those colours just a little bit on my stamp. So just tapped it a few times, and then I'm going to stamp. I hold it down just a few seconds longer than I normally would, just to allow that wet ink to really transfer. Okay, and there's my first flower. Now I could stamp this off and take lots of that colour off and then go in again. I tend not to, I tend to just keep going, and that makes the inks blend more and more, which I think gets me a better effect. And I hope you can see on my craft sheet those colours are starting to mix, which is what I like. So I'm just dipping it in the inks, kind of moving it across the sheet so I get several colours at a time on here. So I'm going to put 3 of those images on there like that. Next I'm going to bring in my water painter. Now you can do this now, you can do it later, or you can do it not at all. So I'm just making sure the water's flowing through there, and I can just pull some of this colour in. So all I'm doing, I'll try and do that by the camera. So these are the areas I've done. I'm just colouring there. I'm just pulling in some of the colour that I've stamped on and just filling in some of those gaps. Now you can completely omit that stage, but you can add more colour to it that way if you want. You can also pick up colour from here. Let's pick up a little bit of that orchid colour and paint it on. So you can do that too. So as you do, the more of this you do, the more you will get a feel for what you like. And actually I'm just going to, instead of putting that all over here, let me just do this on a bit of kitchen paper. I'm just cleaning that brush by squeezing the barrel. That causes the water to flush through the bristles and clean the colour out. So that's now clean for next time. Alright, so the next thing I'm going to do is to dry this so that I can add another layer. So I'm sorry about the noise, but it won't be for long. There we are. Now this ink will reactivate as I add subsequent layers to it, and actually that bit's not quite dry. I'm just going to do that again in a minute. I've just smudged it with my finger. The ink will reactivate, but by drying it in between layers you do keep some of the definition, which you wouldn't have if you just kept adding more wet ink onto the wet ink that's already on there. There we are. Okay, so I'm going to add a little bit of stamping. I'm going to bring in my distressed script stamp. It doesn't have to be a script stamp, it can be anything, but I do like a slightly distressed stamp. If you've got one, I think that adds a nice effect, because the stamping you're going to do will not be perfect. So by deliberately using an imperfect image, I just think that works particularly well. So again, I'm going to move the stamp on the ink on my craft sheet and then just stamp on here. Now, you can't even read that, but it has a look of script to it because it's arranged in lines and there's the odd letter that is visible. So for that reason, I do try and get the words up the right way. And I've stamped on once, I can stamp a second time as well. So we can use our generational stamping on this, just as you might do on any other project. And let's do a little bit more at the top. There we are. So I'm going to dry that too. There we are, and I'm just going to bring my spatter stamp in. So I'm going for a kind of a collage look. I'm not going for anything too precise or too exact. And I'm really not overthinking this. I'm not planning what I do too much. Kind of half of my brain is talking to you and the other half is guiding my hand. And if you can switch off half of your brain as you do this, so that what you're doing is more random and less planned, that will work much better with this kind of technique, given that you cannot plan it exactly. There we are. When I say you can't plan it exactly, I can decide, you know, that I'm going to put a spatter here and I'm going to put a flower there. But what I can't plan exactly is how much that ink is going to spread when it hits the paper, which of those letters is going to be legible and which is just going to be smudgy. So it's much better to go with a very loose style. So let me move those stamps out of the way. So I've got a very white background and I've got all this colour. What I want to do now is knock back some of the white on the background, and I'm going to use the ink that's left over on my sheet here with my spritzer. So I'm going to dilute this a bit more now, and in fact let me put, I should probably have done this before, let's put another piece of paper under there just to hide some of that colour a little bit so you can see the mat and you're not distracted by the ink that I've spilt underneath it. Alright, so quite a lot more colour now, quite a lot more water now on the same colour that's left on the mat. So this, if I tilt it, is really quite runny now. That's going to run and drip. And I'm going to pick this up and I'm going to dab this side into the ink and then lift it up like that. Now I can leave some white areas or not. I will try and leave some white areas, but as I said, this is kind of an approximate technique, and if it's really dripping off the paper, then you can just kind of catch those bits. And I think I just want a little bit more here. There we are. So by selectively pressing on the back, you can make certain areas of your paper or card make contact with the ink, and the areas you don't press down will mostly stay out of the ink, although you can't entirely control it. So let's just catch those drips. Now I'm going to dry that. find your paper is warping quite a lot, drying it on both sides will help to straighten it out. And I'm also ought to just see if there are any comments. No, I don't think there are. So that's okay. I haven't been ignoring any questions in that case. So let me lift this up. I think it's that way round. Yes, it is. Okay, so this to me is just a little bit too white, so I just want some really pale ink on there. What colour do I want? I'd like to try and aim for some turquoise. So I've got a little puddle of turquoise here. I'm just going to add even more water to it to really make it pale and just try and get a little bit in the middle there. I'm going to dab that off a bit. I've got a bit of a straight line there, so I'm just going to kind of dab across and see if we can get rid of that. There we are. And I can lift some of that ink with my paper too, so it's quite flexible. You can come in and out, you can add more ink, you can take some ink off. So I'm going to quickly dry that. Alright, so my original flowers have smudged somewhat because we're using a water-based medium on top of a water-based medium, so the water will affect the layers underneath, but I have still got some definition there, and that's mainly because I've dried it in between. Also, drying it in between gives you the true look of what the colour is like. I can see how dark or how light it is. So my final step is going to be to clean my stamps and then come in and do some actual stamping. So I've got my stamping scrub here. So I'm just going to clean my stamps as normal because it's just our standard ink that's on there. There's a little bit more water than usual, but that's not a problem. So I can clean the stamps just as I usually would. And now I'm going to stamp using the ink pads. I'm going to keep that because I'm going to do something with that in just a minute. So where are my ink pads? Here they are. So I think let's go with Tahitian Tide and the flower. And I'm just going to stamp as I normally would, approximately where that flower was. I'm not trying to get it exact. I'm just adding a bit more definition to where those flowers were. I could come in and do the same with another colour. What I'm actually going to do, I think, is add some spatters in Orchid Oasis. And because this is ink straight from the ink pad, I'm not adding lots of extra water. The images I'm stamping are much crisper. If you've done stamping, you know exactly what I mean by that. And I like that contrast of the more defined images against the really smudgy images. Let's just bring back Mango Melody and we'll do a little bit of that distressed type. And I quite often stamp it partially over the more blurry images that we stamped with the really wet ink. Like that. So for me, that piece is ready to now make into a completed project, and I've got several I'm going to show you in just a minute. But before I do that, I'm just going to show you what you can do with this leftover ink, because we certainly don't want to waste that. So first of all, you can come back in with another piece of card and just press it into the ink like that. So I've got some white left on there, or I can get rid of the white by just pressing one of those white areas into the card again. And I've got a bit of a straight line here. I want to definitely get rid of that. So let's just pop that edge in, but I think I'm going to leave some of the rest of the white. But you can just come in and out like that. So I really like that. I'm just going to let that dry. In fact, I could dry it quickly and then you'll see the true colours. And I'll use that as a background. That's not completely dry, but it's dried enough that you can see what it's going to be like. And then with what's left, I'm going to bring in one of those pieces of book paper, if I can find what I've done with them. Here they are. Here we go. So we've got a piece here from a very old and small book of Shakespeare. This was Macbeth. So I'm going to add just a little bit more water because I don't want this to be too dark, and I'm just going to once again lay that down in there. If you've got one of these really old books, the paper is very soft and absorbent and it picks up the ink beautifully. There we go. So that's going to be gorgeous for me to use. There we are. So I do that a lot with my old ink, but you absolutely don't have to. So I could use that on a card or in my art journal or anything else. If you've still got ink, usually I just keep going and keep going, but I do want to do another piece using shimmery white card just to show you that it works just as well, because you may have some of that in your stash and you may not have watercolour paper. And then I'm going to show you quite a few completed samples, because you might be sitting there saying, well, that's all very well, but what do I do with those? So in case that is you, that's what my husband would be saying, bless his heart. In fact, he looks at quite a lot of what I do and say, but yes, what's it for though? So let me clean these off, and then I'll do exactly the same with some shimmery white card, and then I can put the two side by side and you'll be able to see the differences. Sandy is here. Sandy's saying, hi everyone from the lakeside in Virginia. She says it's hard work here doing nothing. Sandy is still on holiday. It feels a bit like you've been on holiday for most of the year, Sandy. I know you haven't. I'm not envious at all. Not at all. But I'm very glad to have you joining us. Thank you. So this is shimmery white card. So I'm going to do exactly the same as before. Let's start with a different one in the middle. Let's put the darker one in the middle, so that's Orchid Oasis. And then let's put some of the other two colours around the edge. So this is Mango Melody and Tahitian Tide. And can you see I've got some mango on there, so I'll show you how I'm going to clean that up. I think it's actually come off my scrap paper. I don't think I actually dipped this into the ink. So I've got a piece of kitchen paper here, and I'm just going to press it into the ink pad. And that orange ink is just sitting on the surface because I'm dealing with it straight away. If I shut it up and left it until next week, it might be a different story, but because it's just sitting on the surface, it's not a problem. So I can just pull that out. I don't know if you can see that orange ink is coming up on the paper, and now I just need to add a little bit of ink back using my re-inker, and then I have a beautiful Tahitian Tide ink pad again. So here's my matching re-inker. And I'll just add a few drops in there where I've pulled that ink out. Then I have an old spoon, if I can reach it. Yes, I do. My daughter's old Barbie spoon from when she was very much smaller than she is now. So I just act as if I was buttering a piece of bread. I just smooth it. You don't have to use a spoon. You can use a bone folder. Or anything else that is smooth. What you don't want is anything sharp that's going to cut into your foam ink pad. And I'll just clean that off, ready for next time. If you do use a bone folder or anything else like that that's absorbent, bear in mind that it will stain, because although this is a water-based ink, if something absorbs the ink, then it's going to stain it. Right, so that's my ink pad sorted out. I'm just going to lay another piece of clean paper down on here, put that back over there, and off we go again. So we're going to spritz the ink, and you can do these steps in any order you like. So there we are, my ink is beaded up. It's a little bit runny. If I tip this, it's running a little bit, but it's not going crazy. And I'm now going to stamp. So I move my stamp a little bit just to start blending those colours on the stamp. So this paper isn't as absorbent as the watercolour paper is, but it's not, the surface of it is not pilling or getting destroyed with all that water. I'm going to dry that next, being careful not to burn my fingers. What I haven't mentioned is when you're picking your colours, bear in mind that when you mix colours together you get different colours. So here for instance I've got a blue and an orangey yellow and they have mixed to make a green. So bear in mind that would happen if I'd got a pink and a blue. I would end up with lilac tones in there as well. Let's do things in a slightly different order then, just to show you that you can. So let me dip this paper into the ink now. So I'm going to add extra water which dilutes the ink and will mean that whatever goes on my paper will be paler. So you've got some blue on there. So I'm turning this round to get different colours onto different areas of the paper. I've got some white here which I like. I'm just mopping up those drips, but I've got a really straight line here, so I want to get rid of that straight line which isn't doing anything for me. So there we go, that's just smudged that a little bit, so I'm going to dry that. There we are, so I've done things in a different order. I'm now going to do a little bit of stamping with this ink. So let's bring in this typeface. This ink is very runny now, so this will not be very well defined at all, but that's okay. It's almost visual texture happening rather than an actual image being created. There we are. And I'm going to add a few spatters as well. I'm mostly working in threes. I don't know if you've noticed that. So I kind of zigzag across. So I've done flower, flower, flower. Then I've done words, words, words. And then I've done spatters, spatters, spatters. So that just moves your eye through the piece, and odd numbers are always more pleasing than even numbers. So I've done threes, and I could have done fives or sevens rather than twos or fours or six images. Now I could carry on, I could dip it back in the ink if I wanted to. I could add some more stamping with the wet ink. What I'm actually going to do is add some stamping with the ink straight from the ink pad. So I'm going to clean the stamps so I don't put mixed inks into one ink pad, and also the ink on my stamps is very, very wet. I don't need all that water into my ink pads. So let's clean those. So I'll stamp some flowers. Let's do them in Orchid Oasis this time. So I love that definition against that really smudgy background. Then I'll bring in, what should we do? Let's do the typeface in Tahitian Tide. And I'm going to stamp and then stamp a second time, so I've got some much fainter ink there. I'm going to stamp off and stamp once, twice. I'm going to repeat that, stamp off once and then stamp again up there, so it's almost like a visual echo, if you like, of the stamping. So I'm getting this layered effect. I've got the smudged flowers in the background, the smudged colours, the smudged words, and then I'm coming in over the top with something more definite, so it gives so much depth to your work. And finally I've got the spatter stamp and some Mango Melody, and let's just add a few of these. Just for some detail. And then I'll pick up some of this remaining ink on another piece of shimmery white, just so I've done that to show you as well. Oh, that's lovely. The way those colours are blending is just so gorgeous. Got some drips here, so I'm just going to catch those. Give that a quick dry. So it's not completely dry, but it's dry enough. That is gorgeous. Just look at this here. This is so yummy. And then finally, just before I give up on the rest of that ink, I'm just going to throw a bit of book page in. What have I got here? I've got some dictionary paper here. Let's just drop that in. Trying to get rid of the harsh lines. There we are. So that's pretty fun as well. Now you could of course use this same dipping paper into the leftover ink technique with any of our patterned papers. Something like Perfectly Penciled would be fabulous because you've got flowers printed on that, and then you could add very random colour to the paper just by dipping it in your leftover ink that you would otherwise be mopping up and throwing away. Alright, I'm just going to clear the decks a little bit, show you what we've made, and then show you some completed projects. This dictionary paper is very, very wet, so I'm going to put that carefully out of the way. I'm also going to show you my hands. So although my clothes aren't too bad, my fingers are extremely inky, so you might just want to bear that in mind. Alright, so we did some watercolour paper, and we did some shimmery white. Now the distribution of the colours is different and the texture is slightly different, but they are very, very similar. So this is watercolour paper and this one with the blue flowers is shimmery white. So I think the colours merge more on the watercolour paper than they do on the shimmery white. But the difference is quite marginal. So if you've got one or other in your stash, then just use what you've got. So this is watercolour paper and this is shimmery white. But if you're buying something, my preference is the watercolour paper because I think the texture of the paper adds to the texture of the designs that you're going to put on there. Now let me show you some finished projects. So these are the same colours that I've been working with today. So those two colours cards, sorry, are essentially the same, and this one's a little bit different in design. I'll pick those up and show you more detailed. So this die cut is from the Painted Labels set, and this is from the Stylish Shapes. So I created my background exactly as I've shown you and just layered it onto Orchid Oasis card and then a Mango Melody card base. I've stamped here in Orchid Oasis, and that thank you is from the Sentimental Rose kit stamp set. So that the stamps that come in those all-inclusive kits are fabulous to use afterwards. And I just spattered that. I picked up some of the ink off the craft sheet with that water painter and then just spattered it on there, just so it wasn't so bright white. And my die cut is cut from one of these pieces where I've just dabbed up the ink. That one is exactly the same. I've just picked a different colour of ribbon. On this one I have stamped the flower across there as well. So there's those two, and then this one, that's my background that you've just watched me create, and then I've cut this square, which again these squares are from the Stylish Shapes dies, from one of those pieces that I used just to mop up ink. Also this panel here is again cut from that same piece I used to mop up the ink, and then I've put it through the time-worn type embossing folder, which seems particularly appropriate as it's distressed type, the same as that stamp. So thank you, Sandy. I'm glad you like them and I'm glad you like the ideas. So Mary is saying, where can you find the distressed writing stamp? Mary, it is in the Quiet Meadow set. And let me just quickly grab my catalogue. I can even tell you which page that's on. It's in the annual catalogue on page 68. So the annual catalogue, page 68. Here we go. It's this set here, Quiet Meadow. So that's those. These are some other pieces that I made at the same time. So these are my mopping up pieces. You can see where I die cut from them. That's another one. That's where I die cut my square. It's another bit I had from the same batch. And that's another big piece here. I used some of it, I can't think what for actually, or perhaps it was just an oddment I had, I can't remember now. Oh yes, I used some oddments for inside the card, so I've just cut some strips to go inside just to finish them off. So when I'm doing this, I usually sit down and do a batch. You can see you can get quite a lot of pieces of card just from one lot of inking your craft sheet, so there's lots of leftovers. So I always do quite a lot at a time, and you know, let's face it, if you're going to get really messy and inky, you might as well spend an afternoon doing it. And then I've got some here with some different colours to show you. I've got just one of this one, so I did some Christmas ones while I was at it. So the colours on this one are Highland Heather, Coastal Cabana and Pool Party. My stamp that I did my first layers of inking with that really wet ink are the snowflake ones from what's it called? Joyful Flurry, the Joyful Flurry set, which is in the mini catalogue. Then I picked up ink from the craft sheet, exactly as I showed you, just by dipping the card in. This is watercolour paper. And then I've overstamped it with the snowflakes from that same Joyful Flurry set and the little dots that are in there as well. So using ink from the ink pads, the same ink pads, but to give that defined stamping on top of that multi-layered background. And these snowflake dies I also die cut from silver foil, and then I've coloured it with my Highland Heather Stamping Blends marker. The silver was just a bit too bright and silver. I needed something a little bit more subtle, so I've just coloured it purple so it tones in a little bit better. Thank you, Mary. I'm glad you like the cards. And then a couple more. These are also snowflakes, but this time the colours I used are Pacific Point, Mint Macaron and Balmy Blue. And let me lift them up a little bit for you. So again, the same layered background, stamping with the wet ink, dipping the card into the wet ink, drying it all in between, doing some stamping with the wet ink, and then stamping as well using ink from an ink pad, but all the same colours. And this time I've focused my stamping like that, so it's down the left hand side and across the bottom basically, but with a kind of a curve to it. So this area up here has got very little stamping using the ink pad on it. There's a little tiny bit there, but most of this stamping was done just with the wet ink. So the Joyful Wishes is from the same Joyful Flurry stamp set. This time I've left my foil snowflakes in silver, and I've also stamped around the edges of my card base. And this one I just stamped inside. I didn't have any spare card. This is done on the Shimmery white. That first one was watercolour paper. This time it was quite green, so I've put it onto a soft seafoam card base. I've used a soft seafoam ribbon here. I've also spattered it with my Wink of Stella. If I tilt it, I don't know if you'll be able to see, there's lots of little tiny silvery gold droplets, which was my Wink of Stella, just to add some more sparkle. And on my circle here, let's move the ribbon and hopefully you can see, I laid one of those die cut snowflakes on top, held it in place, and then just brushed ink over the top and then removed the snowflake. So I've got like a negative of the snowflake on there. So there you are. So I have done some Christmas cards as well. Just see if there's any more questions. I don't think there are. All right, I'll lay these out. I think I can get them all on just about. So I absolutely love these techniques. I love the unpredictability of them. I love the depth it gives you with all those layers. You will never ever make the same piece twice, which keeps it interesting. And even if you end up with something you don't really like, you can die cut it and it will look beautiful. So I encourage you to have a play. Just set aside a couple of hours and just play around and see what you get. If you get bits you hate, then die cut them or punch them or cut them into pieces. And the bits that you really love, you can use as larger sections on your projects. So I'm just going to turn you back up now. Let's just cover over that lens just so I can say bye-bye to you. And let's take off the mirror imaging, which hopefully I've done. Yes, I have. There we go. So thank you very much indeed for joining me this afternoon. I will look forward to seeing you a fortnight today. Please don't come back here next week because I won't be here. But when I do come back, I will be doing multicoloured images for stamping. So I'll look forward to doing that with you. In the meantime, have a lovely weekend and I will see you again soon. Thanks so much. Bye bye.